Hello and welcome back to the Lieberland Show. I'm your host, Adam J. Carswell. Today, joined by the man, Travis Chappell. Travis is a podcasting wizard, CEO of Guestio.com. He's got some really cool connections that I want to have him share with us here today and talk about how he built and structured those relationships in a way that's very practical. And, I'd say anyone out here can do it if you just listen to the wise words of Travis. But before we get into that, a little bit more background on the story. I got to meet Travis through a mastermind that myself and many of you know, Hunter Thompson, run, called Raise Masters, the #1 mastermind for elite capital raisers. And I was basically like, man, you just crushed it on our stage. Would love to have a conversation with you, pick your brain a bit more, and take it from there. So I was like, let's bring him on the Lieberland Show, because as you guys know, we haven't released a whole lot of episodes yet in 2023. Travis, I don't know if we call it an excuse, but we do have a 16-week-old right around the corner from me. So it's been an interesting year for the
Ooh,
best way possible.
I hear
um,
that.
so we're shifting gears now. We're putting some more gas on the fire for the Lieberland Show. And you're really like our major kickoff episode for the new year, man. So honored to
Let's
have
do
you
it, man.
here. And yeah, could you just I know you could probably go for 2 hours or whatever if you wanted to, but if you could do the 2 minute story of Travis Chappell
Sure.
for our audience, that'd be
Sure. Yeah.
awesome.
Well, first off, yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, I guess go back to childhood. I was born, raised in Southern California. Um, extremely kind of religious community, and went to end up going to Bible college for I was going to be like a youth pastor, assistant pastor, or something like that. So I got a degree, double major in Bible and church ministries. Graduated from there, and then realized I didn't want to do any of that, which is probably something that a lot of people share. Whatever your degree's in is you get the degree, and then you go like, actually, I don't want to do this. You get like an internship your senior year, which is exactly what I did. Got an internship at a church, and I was like my junior year or something. And then during the week, I was working a sales job to like make extra money in college, and I enjoyed the sales job more than I enjoyed interning on the weekends. And I was like, this is odd. The thing I'm supposed to be doing for the rest of my life, I don't enjoy. The thing I'm supposed to be quitting in 4 months so I could go do that other thing is what I actually enjoy. So it was just kind of like this weird position to be in. So I ended up just not going to ministry. I went full time into I was door to door sales at the time. Um, and just seemed like to be a better opportunity than like getting a desk job somewhere working for somebody that I didn't respect, making like 30 grand a year or something like that. It's like, 100% commission door to door is a grind, but at least I can work on my own schedule. I can work on my own terms. Nobody tells me exactly what to do. I can learn from whoever I want to learn from, and I can make as much as I'm willing to work to put in to get. Um, so I did door to door for like 4 or 5 years and started making six figures in my early 20s and realized how really quickly like six figures is not that much money if you want to do anything in life. And so I kind of went back to the drawing board. And this is like a kind of a rock bottom moment for me. And I'm very grateful for my rock bottom moment because it was nowhere near what most people's rock bottom moments are, and I'm really grateful that I was in the position that I was in life to be able to do it the way that I did it, and that uh, that I was able to recognize it that early on instead of like continuing in this hamster wheel of just like producing without knowing where I'm going. So I'm thankful for those things, but the rock bottom for me it was just because like I didn't know what I was doing with my life. Like I said, I grew up extremely religious. I always thought I was gonna be in ministry from the time I was like 7 years or seventh grade, like 12 years old. I thought I was gonna be in full time ministry, and I get out into the real world, and I'm like, I don't want to be in ministry, so my degree is useless. And I don't want to do door to door anymore. So the only skill set I've developed outside of the degree that I got is also pretty useless at this point. And so I tried applying for like corporate sales jobs that came with, the company car, the salary, and that stuff like that. Nobody would hire me. I think probably just because of my age. It didn't make sense to me at the time. And frankly, it still doesn't make sense as a business owner that hires people. It's like, if I saw a kid that was like 22 years old, 23 years old, making six figures, doing 100% commission sales, like yeah, I'm probably going to hire him and give him a company car and a salary, because if he's able to make something from nothing in this 100% commission door to door thing, then he'll probably do pretty well if we feed him leads and give him an air conditioned vehicle to drive around in. It just didn't make sense to me at the time, and it was just kind of like furthering my idea that corporate has a bunch of red tape and BS that I didn't want to deal with. If these people wouldn't even hire me, what are the odds that I'd be able to advance quickly? Because like if you're looking at my tenure versus my results, then we're on different pages here, man. You know what I mean? So Couldn't get a job doing anything else. And it was a rock bottom moment for me because I was like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I don't even know if I want to be in sales. I just did that because that was the only thing I knew how to do, and it made more money than that other thing. So like this is the time of my life where I was almost like a 15-year-old kid going to a career counselor. You know, I was reading books, listening to audiobooks. The first time I came across podcasts, I was just searching for something to do. I looked up FBI applications. I looked up how to get into the fire department. I was looking at the whole array of career options and being like, do I go back to school? Do I go to the certification? Do I do this training? What do I do here? And Podcasting kind of became like my number one medium of choice in terms of like how to learn. I just enjoyed the audio conversations, long form, kind of informal style, while still being able to learn from people, get introduced to other people's stories and backgrounds, get some inspiration, get a little motivation, sprinkle in some practical steps and some things to do to start changing your life. And um, started doing that thing. And then when I realized that people can make money podcasting, I was like, oh, that seems interesting. I have no idea how to do that, and I don't know how it's going to work out, but it does seem fun. And yeah, so I think I'll just do that. So I started a podcast. It did not go well for like the first year and a half, 2 years, and then it started going a lot better. And then I was finally able to quit door to door to go into podcasting full time because I had enough people reaching out and asking me how to help them, how I could help them start a podcast. And so just started doing podcast coaching and consulting and things like that. Started a course and a community. We did masterminds and events. COVID happened. We shut down masterminds and events, started a software company. And then after the software company got kicked off, we started an agency on the back end of that. So like, it's kind of just been like a journey of, you know, what are people asking me for and how can I provide a solution to this problem that people are experiencing? And now it's turned into, now I have my podcast, Travis Makes Friends, which was like 800 something episodes now. And then I have my marketing agency where we get people booked on podcasts like PR tours. We produce and launch podcasts for folks, do podcast marketing, basically like full stack podcasting and content agency. And then I also have my software company Guestio. So that's kind of like the 30,000 foot view of everything that's happened in the last 7 years or so, give or take.
Wow. So are you 30 yet, man?
I turned 30 up in August of last year. So yeah,
Okay,
I'm 30.
there we go.
Yeah.
Um, I mean,
It
that's
makes
pretty
me feel
wild.
old.
Sorry, what?
I know a lot of people are listening to this right now and they're like, oh, you're only 30. Stop it. You know what I mean? But like, there's something that happens. Are you in your 20s or 30s?
I'm 31, and
31.
relatively speaking, I think I know where you're. Continue with what you're gonna say.
Yeah. I was just going to say that, like, to me, when I was in my 20s, it felt like whenever I had a seat at the table in my 20s, I did feel like the young person. It was like, oh, yeah, I'm young, I'm in my 20s. Like most people are there, like they're 42, 44, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I'm 28. Like, oh my gosh, you're so young. I'm like, yeah, I am pretty young actually to be in this. Like, it just objectively is true. There's nobody else in their 20s here, But then once I turned 30, bro, it felt like this weird like transition into adulthood where it was no longer like I look my age now. I always looked older. That people were like, when I was 26, I had a beard still. I had a beard when I was like 18. But when I was, 24, 25, 26, people would guess that I was 31, 32, and now that I'm 30, people are like, oh, what are you, like 31? And I'm like, oh man, the guesses are getting closer to my actual age. You know what I mean? Like I feel at this point I'm a real adult. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm no longer, but I know, I don't know. I know on the scope of life, I know that I'm, objectively younger. I'm not trying to, complain or anything, but
well,
it was like a weird transition though to turn 30 for me because it just feels different. It feels like I'm a real adult now.
totally. I agree in many ways, and then I'm also sympathetic to like the angle you're taking here because um, it wasn't until I turned 31 I had a conversation with someone who I've really, I'd say, just always viewed as a mentor, looked up to in my life, and I was, and this is for everyone tuned in. And Travis, if you ever asked you, I'm sure you've asked people this question before, but this is a really good way to get information out of someone who is maybe ahead of you a few years, and then also get kind of buy-in from them to want to be a part of your journey. Just say, hey, based on the skills, traits, characteristics that you see in me, what's something that you recommend that I pay attention to that maybe I'm not seeing.
Hmm.
And what the individual said to me was, he's like, how old are you now? I'm like 31. He's like, you might feel like you're getting up there, but just so you know, it's still really early in the game for you. So don't ever feel like you've missed the boat. It's like keep adding tools to your tool belt, And I remember like part of this I think is, blame whatever you want, society. And hey, Liberlandians, we will talk some Liberland stuff here soon. But you look at professional athletes in their career, they're glorified and their careers end at about the age that we're referencing now. You look at like maybe musicians, artists, whatever, Justin Bieber, like these people who, step into massive amounts of wealth at 20. And I remember even at age 20, myself thinking like, okay, so I should be getting close to this, 6-figure range now, which for me, that didn't happen until I'd say within the past couple of years. So, to your point, it's just like, uh, there's this realization that you have to take a step back and say, okay, I am still young. I still got a lot of growth ahead of me. And, even at 30, you can be, by in many regards, the youngest one in the room.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. Yeah, and something I try to do on purpose actually is put myself in rooms where I am both the youngest and the poorest and potentially the dumbest in the room. You know what I mean? Like those are the best rooms to be in.
For sure. So, all right. Well, a lot of it comes down to, and this is actually another thing that you mentioned. This would be a good transition. I don't know if you're familiar with the 4 levels of or 4 levels of value. It's implementation, unification, communication, and imagination. And to your point, about 99% of the world gets stuck on that implementation and unification level, which would be you're working with your hands, you're, manager at a auto body shop or McDonald's or whatever, you're going to be capped out at about 80K a year. Then on the unification level, you're managing people who do the thing. So you might still even get, as you pointed out, into the 6-figure range, but you're really capped out at the $250,000 level. And then also whoever you're working for, whether it's on the low end managing people at McDonald's or managing people at Facebook, they want you to know that they own you. So yeah, you're making 6 figures, but I mean, as far as free time, it might not be there. And then stepping into the level of communication and then imagination, we'll use, Steve Jobs is a great example of this. I mean, someone who spent a lot of time in his communication and imaginative space. These could also just be podcasters, authors, actors, people who've mastered creating messages that move the message or conversations that conjure up cash flow. That's when you can really start paving and creating your own future. And so you started realizing this. It sounds like in many ways through podcasting after mastering sales, moving to podcasting, but you also endured long enough at being bad in order to become good, it sounds like too. So I guess what I'd like to say now is on that communication level, as we're moving into that 3rd level of value, how are you leveraging communication to create these dream connections that I've seen you, we'll use Shaq as an example, someone who you have a good relationship with now too. How are you leveraging communication to get in touch with people, to just move you into that next level?
I appreciate the question, man. Communication is everything. It's everything. If especially in the next decade or two, it will be the skill that separates the highest income earners from the rest of the world. Communication will be the number one skill. Why? Because technology is going to take over a lot of other skills. Even if you look at brilliant software engineers, AI is writing code right now in 2023. Like you can tell AI to write a piece of code in a certain language and it does it pretty well. Now you have to be an engineer to be able to go through that code and make sure that there's nothing bad that it wrote, or maybe do some embellishments or take some things away from it, or make it more efficient or whatever. But this is 2023 version of that. In 2033 version of that, when AI has literally like exponentially by thousands of factors learned how to do it better from the data that it's currently getting right now. I mean, that will no longer be the ultimate thing that separates somebody, is like, just because I know how to do this thing or I know how to do this thing. It's like, well, yeah, but so does this machine. You know what I mean? And so, not to say that AI will not also prevent a lot of people from writing, or take over a lot of writing and written communication, but in terms of like verbal communication skills, I think that's going to be the thing that separates people, because at the end of the day, we still want, need, and crave that human connection. And the people who are able to command other people through the spoken word are still going to be the people who others are looking to for advice, for guidance, for leadership. for vision. With when there's no vision, like everything just kind of starts crumbling at the surface. There's no foundation, there's nowhere where we're going. And so you need those visionaries and those expert communicators at the top who are able to parse through all the information that we're the inundation and flooding of information that we are currently getting and will be exponentially increasing over a period of the next decade or two as things like AI continue to advance
I
the
just
way
got
that
to
they
hop
are.
in and
So
say, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with what I've been sharing with a lot of people recently too, which is at the end of the day, there's no replacing the human connection.
right.
That it doesn't matter how. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen some AI. You can tell the difference between human art and AI art. Even now, it's getting to that point, and so that human connection that comes through hearing Travis Chappell speak, as opposed to some Travis Chappell robot, we intuitively pick up on that, and it just drives her. I'm happy you're mentioning that because I've been trying to share this same point with so many people recently. So back over to you, man. And transitioning that into building up connections that can really level you into that next playing field faster. I mean, what are some tools or strategies that, from the little that you do know about Liberland, that you think we want to get in the room with more countries or maybe more people of influence that will be like, hey, this is a real country that I like. So you've
Yeah.
been able to do that in a kind of similar level.
Yes, and it all comes down to, in my opinion, it comes down to credibility and trust. So when I first started, I would reach out to somebody and say, "Hey, I would love to bring you on my show." And the answer was typically no, or "How many downloads do you have?" And then I got better at phrasing the question, and I started, saying something a little bit different. And then it was like, "Oh, I got a yes." And then I would have to send out 20 pitches to get one or two yeses from big people, right? Like I wasn't, if it was at a certain level or certain quality, I could get, almost anybody at this certain level or whatever.
Are
But if
you
I
able
went a level
to,
or
I
two
guess,
above that,
from a like, I don't know if it's like legal, are you able to like disclose some of the names that you've had, just so that way our listeners know, like,
yeah, but like to date,
yeah, just like a couple like bigger names, just that people
yeah, I
might
mean,
recognize.
Shaquille O'Neal is probably the most widely known or widely recognized one. If you're a sports fan, you might know Paul Pierce as well. He's top five or top 75 and in the NBA in NBA history. And then like Rob Deerdeck, who hosts
Nice. Wow.
Ridiculousness and MTV.
Mhm.
Big skater guy turned really hedge fund manager now. His fund.
That's someone who's worth studying right there.
It's a wild story, man. It's a wild story. It was one of my favorite conversations that I've had. His story is just so impressive and inspiring. When turning, going from a skater to building a $500 million portfolio of companies that he invests in and helps like ideate and take to market. It's just, he's a wild dude. Um, and then Dr. Nicola Pera, who's the most followed psychologist online. I think she's got like 8 million Instagram followers or something like that. I'm actually bringing her on the show again today.
Nice.
So like a wide array. We've had a couple of like a few billionaires. Tillman Fertitta, the owner of the Houston Rockets, we've had on the show. Jeff Hoffman, the founder of Priceline.com, we've had on the show. So a few billionaires. We've had multiple New York Times bestselling authors. We had Chris Voss, the FBI hostage negotiator and
Nice.
bestselling
Like,
author of Never Split the Difference. Grant Cardone, Molly Bloom, who the movie Molly's Game was made about. We had her on. So we've had like athletes, we've had comedians, like I've had Brian Callen on. And then I'm interviewing Brendan Schaub soon. And then, picking off a few more people in the comedy world. So we have like comedy, we have entertainment, we have athletes, we have brilliant entrepreneurs and investors. We have New York Times bestselling authors. We have YouTubers and podcasters, creators. So just a wide array of different people who all have the one thing in common, which is they strive for excellence in their life. And I want to know more about how they've done that. And that's essentially like the core concept of the show. But when I was first starting, zero of those people would say yes because nobody knew who I was and nobody knew what my show was about and nobody had any reason to say yes. So if you reach out to enough people, you're going to get a yes eventually. And so I finally got a yes. And then that yes turned into another yes. And then that yes turned into another yes. And then what I found was like the more I was able to build credibility in my reach out, the more I was able to prevent somebody from having to do additional research beyond the reach out itself, meaning that I was able to name enough people in that where they recognize enough people where they didn't have to go Google my name. They just saw the people on there and they're like, yes, let's do it. Basically, I figured out that like the number one metric to somebody saying yes is time, because anybody successful knows that time is more important than any other asset that you have in life, including money, and especially money. Time is like the ultimate asset. And so if you're being disrespectful of somebody's time, meaning that you're setting them, when you're reaching out to them and asking them to come on your show, you're sending them like a 500-word essay on why they should do it. Like that's probably not going to work very well, because that's a disrespectful of their time. They have probably 433 other emails in their inbox they're trying to get through because they just got to inbox 0 yesterday and now they have 430 in their inbox and they're trying to get through all of them. And you taking up an entire sea of text, of time from them, is just like they might not even make it to the bottom of it before they archive or send it to somebody else on their team or put it in their defer folder. Like they're just trying to get through their emails. Whereas if you send something really short and succinct, you have a higher chance of them actually reading it and getting down to the brass tacks. And so I keep it as short as I possibly can, and I give as much credibility as I can so that they don't have to take additional time to go like, okay, who's Travis Chappell though? What's his show about? They don't have to go to Google. They don't have to ask a team member. They see that I've interviewed 12 of their friends that they already know, like, trust, recognize, or follow. And then they go, okay, sure, let's do it. And then they move on to their next thing. So the goal is to be really, really simple, get the couple of yeses. And then what makes it, because you're asking in terms of like Lieberland and what you guys can do, like is as soon as you start packing in the credibility, everything becomes easier. It's like this, you're shoving this boulder uphill, and then you push it over the other end and it starts just like growing and building and running down the hill all by itself. That's kind of what it is. There's a lot of heavy lifting at the beginning because you got to convince a lot of people that you're worth spending time with. But then once you build up a certain bank of people, now it's like almost anybody we reach out to and actually get a hold of says yes to the show because they see somebody like Shaq and they're like, oh, I want to associate with somebody who's interviewed Shaq. It must be a decent show if he's interviewed Shaq. You know what I mean? So like it's so much easier. And now we have people reaching out to us. Like some of my best interviews in the past 2 or 3 months have been publicists or managers reaching out to me and saying, hey, can you interview my client? They're doing this promotion or they got this thing coming up, can you interview them? Like that wouldn't happen if we didn't already have like a bunch of stuff already going for us. But it took years of building up credibility from absolutely nothing until we actually were able to make it to that point. But now it just is becomes much, much, much easier. It's almost any, like I said, if I can actually get a hold of somebody and get the pitch in front of them, the majority of the time they're saying yes, because there's too much credibility for them to turn it down at this point.
Price of admission right there, guys. Press pause, go back, listen to it, whatever. There's something you mentioned there that I at least feel like I've been doing it subconsciously. If not, then dang, I got to get my stuff straight. But it helps to hear you phrase it the way you did, because I just never actually thought of it. It makes so much sense, but I never thought of it that way, which is potentially sending someone a long message is out, especially if it's, someone of credibility that you're trying to get onto your show or whatever. It's disrespectful to send them a long message because time is infinitely more valuable than money. I never thought of it that way before.
Yeah.
At least consciously. So that's one to really let sink in there. And I could tell you looks like you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, it was just a matter of feedback and for me, because when I first started, I was like, I need to give them as much reasoning as I can because they don't know who I am. But I had never experienced how busy somebody is like that. And look, I'm not even scratching the surface of what a lot of the people that I've interviewed schedules are, of what their schedule looks like, and I already feel like that. Having my podcast that does pretty well, and then having my software company, and then having my agency, and then starting a new mastermind, and then having 8 or 9 employees, and then having 2 small kids and a wife, and it's like all of this stuff comes in, and then I still try to be in the gym every day. I try to take care of myself. That there's only so much time, and so I experience that at the level that I'm at. It's got to be so much worse for somebody else who gets literally thousands of messages every single month because they're just that well known. And you think you're going to be able to break through when you have 9 paragraphs of 180 words per paragraph, where it's just like they're going to look at that and not read it at all. They're going to read like the first sentence of each paragraph. Probably if your ask isn't very like top of isn't very clear, then they're just going to skip it. They're going to archive it. They're going to send it to somebody on their team. They're going to put it in a defer folder. You may not ever hear back, and if you do, it'll probably be from their like executive assistant saying like reach out again in 3 years from now. You know what I mean? So it was just a matter of feedback for me where I started sending them and realizing that like, oh, I'm not getting responses on these. I wonder why, you know, and then realizing they're like, oh, I guess that makes sense. Now I get messages that are short and succinct and to the point. It's like, hey, we want to bring you on our show. And then here's like those 6 people that you know that have already been on the show. And here's what we talk about. Do you want to do it? It's like 4 sentences, you know what I mean? Very crystal clear. There's some credibility, and then the ask is very clear. And it's like, okay, sure. Yeah, let's do it. Because I can make that decision in 15 seconds as I'm going through my email. You
Yeah.
know, if somebody sends me a freaking 1,000 word essay, and then I have to be like, okay, let me see if I can make this one happen. And I have to go to Google and I have to Google their name and I have to go to Apple and look at their show and, you know, ask my team to see how many downloads they get. It's just, if you're giving me a bunch of homework, it's a lot less likely that it's going to happen. And like I said, I'm not near as busy and even close to the level of some of the people that I've interviewed. And those are the people everybody's trying to get a hold of. And they're trying to do it with all these ways that they think is going to work because they would be flattered if they got an email like that, but they don't realize that that person gets 1,000 emails like that every month, you know?
Mhm.
So you got to
Yeah.
do something that's going to cut through the noise and, you know, be respectful of their time.
Yeah. Okay. Love it, man. As we wind things down here, I guess zoning in even more on this specific topic, do you have, or do you think, if not, could you create off the top of your head a bit of a framework for any type of outreach like this? I said for, you know, we'll make it even more specific for Liberland. And I know maybe you don't have experience like reaching out to governments or countries or whatever, but just like from your viewpoint,
Yeah.
right, man, it's all kind of the same. Like step one, step two, step three, what would you do based on, you know, what you do know about the country?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the principles are very similar. The number one thing, like I said, is keeping it short and concise. Being very clear about an ask and only having one ask is another big thing. If you have 4 different things that you're asking of somebody, they're probably just gonna not even respond. It has to be one clear, simple ask that should be toward the bottom of the email, and then yeah, to me, the framework that I teach people is like start with value. So make them know that you've done some sort of research about them or that you're familiar with something that most people wouldn't be familiar with. So if I'm reaching out to somebody that everybody reaches out to, you know, I might listen to a podcast episode that they did on somebody else's show and then find a piece of their story that you would have to listen to a podcast episode of theirs to know. Like it's not going to be on their Wikipedia page or whatever. And I'm going to reach out to them and say something like, hey, this piece of blah, blah, blah that you did on this episode with blah, blah, blah was actually really impactful for me because of this one reason. But again, keep it as short as I possibly can, 1 or 2 lines on that. So I start with value just to let them know that like I'm not just a regular person in your audience. Like I've, you know, done some research and there's a little bit of like flattery there that kind of gets people's attention. Um, but it has to be unique and it has to be genuine, you know, because I get a lot of these emails where people try to do that and they're like, I love your show. And then you can see that they just like copied and pasted my most recent episode from my website and put it in the email. And it's just like, okay, you clearly are just doing this because you think it works. And it's like it's got to be genuine and it's got to be succinct. So start with value. And then give some information, like really minimal information. I usually say something like, my name is Travis Chappell, and then I'll link Travis Chappell to my website, travischappell.com. And so that way, like, if you want to read more about me, you can go to my website and you can consume all 800 episodes of my content if you want to. You can read my about page. You can look at all my social media. You can email me. You can do anything you want from my website. But I'm not going to take up, again, 4 paragraphs of white space here in this email to tell you about me. Like, if you want to know more, you can go learn more. So my name is Travis Chappell. You know, whatever the reach out is, you know, you want to give a little bit of information about why you're even in communication with them. So it's important to go through the why. So my name is Travis Chappell. I have a show called I have a top rated podcast called Travis Makes Friends. And then I'm going to throw in some credibility. And this is the part where I go like, I've been blessed to interview people like, and I look at that, the person who I'm reaching out to, I'll go look at their socials, make the reach out more personal. I'll go look at their socials and look to see who are the people that they know, like, trust, or engage with that I've already interviewed or I know or I have some sort of a connection with. And then I go back to the email and I list all of the people that I can find. Um, and at this point, almost every time there's somebody, at least one or two people. A lot of times there's, 20, 25 people that we kind of have in common, or connections that are in common, or friends. So I'll list out all of those people, and then at the end of it, it's just, I'll go in for my ask. So it's the value, and then it's the information, and then it's the credibility, and then it's the ask. And the ask is short and sweet to the point again. It's, so it's like, and this is sounding like a lot of things, but like I said, it takes up 4 or 5 lines. Like value, 1 or 2 lines. Information, 1 line. Credibility, as this was the only one that I always give a lot more space to, because I'll list as many people as I can find, because again, I want it to be like a slap in the face of credibility. Like, you can't, like, you start reading the list and you see the first couple and you're like, oh, that's cool, that's cool, and then you start reading more and you're like, oh geez, oh, how, what, really, how do I not know this guy? You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the idea that I want to get across. So if I can list 20 names and I know that they know all of them, I'll list 20 names. Or I might list 3 names. It just depends on that particular person. So give the credibility piece, and then the ask comes right after that, and it's just like I'd love to add you to this lineup sometime. Reply back and let me know a couple of times, or use this link to schedule. My assistant's also CC'd on this email, and she can help set up the schedule. And then I always finish off with a thanks in advance or something like that. Just something like, it just creates an open loop. And again, if it may not work for most people, but if it's something subconscious that can increase my odds of getting a reply by 10%, why not just throw it in there? So I always just say thanks in advance. Like I said, it opens a psychological loop for a lot of people, even if it's subconscious, where if you're thinking for something that they haven't done yet, it makes them want to do that thing and close that loop. But again, that's not going to increase your conversion by 400%, but 10 to 15%, sure. And if you're going to send out 300 emails over the course of 6 months, then like 10 to 15% gives you 30, 40 replies more. So why not throw it in there? So I'll say something like, thank you in advance for your thoughtful reply, I know that you're busy, or something like that, or I don't take your time lightly. And then I'll say, sign my name at the end of it. So that's like a quick template that anybody can use to have probably better results than they're currently having if you're doing a lot of cold reach out, and you're starting from scratch.
Thank you. Learned a lot, man. Learned a lot. And to your point, this is the beauty of podcasting for any aspiring podcasters out there as well. You find the people that you want to learn from, and ask them questions in front of 10, 20, 30 thousands, maybe no one, right? Maybe no one knows no one's listening to your show, but if you use what Travis is talking about, you can bypass that, right? So, Travis, thank you for investing your most valuable resource with us here today, your time. Could you give our audience, you got eyes and ears all over the globe right now, what would be your one call to action for our listeners and viewers here today?
Commit to long-term improvement of yourself, because that's ultimately the number one thing that we have control over, and the ultimate thing that you're responsible for is who you become, and who you become will result in what you accomplish. Because everybody only looks at, everybody sets New Year's resolutions, and it's never about who they become, it's about what they want to do. And almost every time, if the goals that you're setting are too big, then you're going to get overwhelmed, and then you're going to quit. That's why like 80, it's an astounding number. I'll have to look it up later to confirm, but it's like 80% of people give up on New Year's resolutions before January is over 80%. Like, it's a massive percentage. And that's because they're not focusing on changing who they are. They're not committed to improving themselves. They just want to achieve a goal. And it's like, well, if you don't ever work out and you eat like crap all the time, and you're 85 pounds overweight, and you've been this way for the last decade and a half, you can't just decide overnight, unless you're like, got a screw loose like David Goggins or something, that you're going to become a marathon runner. And all of a sudden, in 3 months from now, you've lost 65 pounds, and you just drink water, you don't eat sugar, you don't drink alcohol, and you're, super, Mr. Olympia now. Like, it's a ridiculous thing to like, if I say it like that, everybody's like, oh, ha ha ha, that's funny, but everybody still writes their goals like that. So stop focusing on the goal and start focusing on becoming the person that's capable of achieving the goal, and you'll have a lot better results over the long haul. So you just got to make that commitment that just like, look, I know I'm going to fail along the way. I know there's going to be setbacks. I know all that stuff. But if I fast forward in 5 years from now and I keep doing these small changes over time, I know that the version of me in 5 years from now is going to be capable of achieving so much more than the version of me right now. And you have to constantly be thinking about that version of yourself and do things that that version of yourself will thank you for now, which is difficult to do because you have to be able to sacrifice short-term gain for long-term gain.
Liberlandians, this has been another episode of the Liberland Show featuring Travis Chappell. Go check him out right now, travischappell.com. Travis, you're the man. That was the ultimate outro right there. Thank you, dude.
Appreciate it, dude. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, guys. We will catch you in the next episode. Thanks.